Welcome to the Specialty in Basket Needs Project, Phase 2 training video. In this phase, we will guide you on how to understand the current state of the problem and identify its root causes. So let's get started. As always, we encourage you to watch this video with your team and have the Phase 2 workbook on hand to follow along. If you don't have it with you, you can find the workbook in your Phase 2 folder inbox. Please close any unnecessary applications on your laptop and silence your phone to refrain from distractions. There will be a discussion and working session with your team throughout the video, so feel free to pause the training video as needed. This video will recap what we covered in the Phase 1 training video, and then we will jump into Phase 2 of the project cycle, which is the current state and root cause analysis. At the end, we will conclude with next steps. As you're aware, there are 4 phases in the SPIN project as shown here. Let's do a quick recap of what your team accomplished in Phase 1. By now, you and your diet partner have completed a preliminary data review and initial process walks, and then defined the problem you want to solve, met with your Tier 2 leadership to get approval on your project, and lastly, assembled your SPIN project team. Please ensure that you have completed all the items on the checklist of your Phase 1 before moving on to Phase 2. With that said, we'd like to congratulate you on completing Phase 1 of the SPIN project. You're now ready to start Phase 2. This video will focus on the steps of Phase 2. As a reminder, from here on, you'll be working with the full team you assembled at the end of Phase 1. The purpose of this phase is for the team to have an in-depth understanding of the problem that they are trying to tackle. To achieve this, the team needs to do additional observations, collect and analyze needed data to identify the root causes of the problem, and know how to prioritize them based on their impact to the problem. So let's take a look at the 5 steps that you and your team will complete for Phase 2. Building up from the 5 steps of the previous phase, here are the next 5 steps that will help you and your team have an in-depth understanding of the problem you're trying to address. These include conducting a deeper data dive and observations, creating a current state map, finalizing the problem statement, completing the 5 whys, and organizing the problem's root causes. So let's jump into the first step, which is preliminary data review and observations. The initial data and observations in Phase 1 helped you define an area to work on. Now, you will do a deeper analysis of the data using additional reports and metrics to better understand your problem area. You will also do more focused and detailed observations in the areas related to your problem. This deeper study will help you and your team understand the root causes of the problem so that your interventions can be targeted and effective in solving the problem you have identified. The purpose of using data in your project is to provide background on the current state, make informed decisions on the project goals and targets, track progress towards the project target, determine what changes or adjustments need to be made, and measure the impact of the project. So now that you understand the purpose of data, let's go over where you can find additional data sources you can use for your in-depth data analysis. There is a Tableau workbook where you can analyze different metrics around the in-basket work. You've already seen a few of the metrics in the preliminary data dashboards. However, the Tableau workbook includes many additional metrics that may be helpful in gaining a better understanding of your problem area. If you're new to using Tableau, please watch the Tableau training video that is in your Phase 2 Toolkit folder inbox. The training video will provide a walkthrough of how to navigate and utilize Tableau. As always, please check that you have access to the Tableau SPIN dashboards. If you or someone in your team doesn't have access to them, you can submit a ticket via the Service Center portal. You can refer to the Tableau data glossary spreadsheet located in your workbook for any dashboard filtering instructions. As always, if you have any Tableau questions or need help, please come to OA office hours. In the first phase, the team tallied the different types of messages that physicians received in their in-basket. If you haven't done so, you can convert the data from the tallies into a pie chart to help the team visually see the distribution of the message types. There's a message type tally analysis Excel document where you can easily input your data and it would automatically populate a pie chart. And if you like, you can also continue to tally additional message types when you do additional observations to give you a robust data set. It is important to prepare new team members for doing more detailed observations. The following portion of this video will teach teams about how to identify waste when they go see. It also includes guidance on how to prepare for the observations, tools to use, and how to debrief learnings. If your team is well versed in observations, you may forward this section. This next part of the video is intended to teach your team about identifying waste during process walks. So what is waste? Waste is anything that is not value added. That could be any action or step in a process that is not required to complete a process successfully. And when you remove waste, only the steps that are required to deliver a service or a product remains in the process. No one would want to build waste into a process, so why do we have so much waste? Well, that's because it's hard to see. Over time, you'll find that your ability to identify and eliminate waste will improve, but at first, it will be challenging to see waste in the work that we do, similar to finding the cheetah in this picture. This is often because we confuse activity and hard work or effort with value. Staff may be working really hard, but that does not mean the work that they are doing at the end of the day will add value. For example, this spaghetti diagram shows the motion of the MA and the doctor for one patient visit. As you can see, the MA is going back and forth from one space to another, working really hard for this one patient. But is it value add? If we are able to hold a strict definition of what value add is and waste, it allows us to start to examine the work we do through a new set of eyes and see the opportunities that are in front of us. So by removing waste, it will not only help our patients, but it will also help our teams by enabling them to focus on the value added steps of their job. So we need a way and common language to identify waste. As you can see, there are 7 types of waste. There's transportation waste, which is moving something from one point to another. There's inventory waste, which is excess or needed supplies, files, or copies. There's motion waste, which is searching for information, supplies, or equipment. There's waiting waste, which is delays in queues of all types. There's overprocessing waste, which is producing something that the customer doesn't want. There's overproduction waste, which is producing too much. And then there's defects, which is producing something that is not up to the standard, leading to rework. This information lives in your 1-point lesson found in your workbook. So as you start to practicing waste and identifying the different types of waste, it will become easier to see the cleverly disguised waste in your workplace. Process walks are an important part of understanding the problem, so it's essential for the team to be intentional with this, such as finding the time to do process walks, being organized with all the logistics, and having all the materials to execute process walks with your team. Process walks may take a lot of planning, but it's definitely not hard. You just need someone in your team to help the team stay organized. So with that in mind, we will go over the planning and execution of process walks. So let's jump in. So what is a process walk? A process walk is going where the work or process happens in order to see the 3 actuals. What we mean by the 3 actuals is being able to observe the actual process being done by the actual place, by the actual people. So by doing this essential step, it will help you and your team grasp the problem, define an area of focus, and the gap for box 1 of your A3. So why do process walks? Process walks helps you gain a deep understanding of the steps of a process as it actually happens. It provides the observer obtain first-hand input and feedback from those doing the work. It provides an opportunity to identify waste and opportunities throughout the process. It allows the observer to see process throughout a fresh set of eyes. It helps gain an understanding of the patient experience. When you set up a process walk, the Tier 1 should coordinate with the SPIN team on who will do process walks, when, and with whom. Someone from the SPIN team should also communicate with the frontline team members that observations will be happening so that they are prepared. A tool that you utilize during process walks is a blank swim lane template that you and your team can map out the process you're observing. We will go into details about process mapping in a bit. Lastly, the tool on the right is the 3 actuals worksheet. This worksheet helps the observers write down all the steps that they're observing and detailing who's doing the steps, how long does it take to complete, and write any comments. During the observation process, make sure the observers explain the purpose of the process walks with those that they're observing. Check that they're noting the process in the 3 actuals worksheets or sketching the process in the swim lane template. Check that they're writing down the types of waste that they're seeing in the process and are staying on task and not getting distracted by other things. Once the team is done with the observations, you should have some debriefing time with the team to inquire what they observed, any waste or opportunities that they identified. The Tier 1's managers should collect the 3 actual sheets so you can utilize their findings in building out the current state map and add any identified waste and opportunities. If you have established regular project team meetings, our suggestion is at this point, the team completes the process walks and then return at a subsequent meeting to complete the remainder of the steps for Phase 2. If you would like to continue with the video, that is totally fine, but please commit to doing the process walks even if you believe you know what is happening. It is always important to confirm your understanding by actually seeing it firsthand. Now let's move on to step 7, which is to create a current state map. The team will build a current state map that details the process and the ways where the selected problem exists. So let's jump into what that looks like. Process maps are a graphical depiction of a process that is made up of process steps, inputs, and outputs separated by process owners. Mapping a process provides a clear and accurate picture that can be shared and understood by the team and get alignment on how we see the current state. So why create a process map? It simplifies the understanding of the process by breaking down complex steps into smaller, easy to follow steps. It helps identify any bottlenecks, gaps, and opportunities in the process, and it simplifies the communication of a process through a user-friendly visual format. And it clarifies how each role contributes to the completion of a process. This is an example of a process map or swim lane for baggage handling from the point of arrival of the plane to the end point where the passenger picks up the luggage. Each lane represents a role in the process, and it details all the steps of that respective role. Process maps are read from left to right, and the shapes of a process map stands for something. The ovals represent start and end points, the rectangles represent steps, the diamonds represent decision points, and the splats represent any callouts. So let's go over the steps to create a process map. First, you need to identify a process to map and determine the start and end points of that process. From there, you need to identify the roles that participate in that process. That way you know which roles you need to observe. From there, you start listing out the tasks involved in that process. So for example, if you're observing a patient's journey through an office visit, the task that you would capture could be check-in, rooming, visit, and checkout. The fourth step will be writing out the sequence of the steps in the proper order. So that would mean adding more details to the check-in tasks, such as insurance verification, updating demographics. This may take several attempts or observations to get the right level of detail and order, which is okay. And from there, draw out the process map using the process mapping symbols we reviewed in the previous slide. Here are some tips to help you and your team with mapping the process. Use paper and pencil with your initial drafts because you don't need to be worrying about neatness when starting off drafting your process map. Go see, don't do it from memory while you are back at your desk because it is critical that you are mapping what you are seeing and not what you should be seeing. And that's why it's very important that the setup of process walk goes well so that the observers have the ability to follow the process in real time. Keep the process map simple. Test your drafts by having someone do observations using the map you drafted and make any needed edits. Practice as much as you can. Remember, everything can be mapped. And lastly, go ahead and layer on key data, waste, and opportunities in your process map so that your map can tell a story. This is a process map of the in-basket workflow of a department, and it follows the journey of messages landing into a pool and how it gets addressed by different care team members, including the physician. As you can see, there are multiple rows to call out the different roles of this process, which includes LVNs, ESRs, and physicians. And from there, they are adding the tasks of each role and sequenced it from left to right. The team also overlaid clouds to call out any waste or variation that they observed. If you have established regular project team meetings, our suggestion is at this point the team completes drafting the current state map and then return at a subsequent meeting to complete the remainder of the steps for Phase 2. If you would like to continue with this video now, that is totally okay, but please commit to putting together a current state map to help the team have an overall view of the current state in-basket process. Next, we're moving to step 8, which is finalizing the problem statement. In this step, the team will articulate the problem and the gap that they're trying to solve for. So let's go over how to put together a problem statement. So, what is exactly a problem statement? A problem statement is a short, clear explanation of an issue or challenge you are trying to address. The foundation of a clear problem statement consists of numerically quantifying the gap from current performance to the goal. So remember, if you can't quantify it, how do you know if you have a problem? It should be very simple enough for a stranger to understand and should relate to the team. It includes who this problem impacts and why it's important to address it. And lastly, if it helps tell the story, you can include any background or contextual information into the problem statement. Now that we have defined what a problem statement is, let's review some questions that can help you articulate your problem statement. The questions on the template help the team document the current performance, why is it a problem, what is the target, and by when you want to reach it. Just as you might want to ask a series of clinical questions to understand a patient's symptoms, these questions help us get clear on what is the exact problem we are aiming to address. So here's an example of how a team answered those questions. Notice at the bottom we have a summary statement that encapsulates elements of each answer to provide a clear and complete problem statement. It meets the criteria that we discussed earlier by numerically quantifying the gap, ensure the statement is clear and simple to understand, and includes who this problem impacts and why it's important to address it. When the team was able to put together a problem statement, they were able to visually demonstrate the gap that they were trying to close between their actual performance and their target. Here are some questions to consider when drafting your problem statement. Feel free to pause the video to take the needed time to review the questions and answer them with your team. These questions can be found in the problem statement questions template found in your workbook. As always, make sure each team member has the opportunity to reflect on the following questions and share their thoughts with the team. Next, we're moving into step 9, which is completing the 5 whys. In this step, the team will identify the potential root causes that are contributing to the problem. So let's take a deep dive into identifying root causes. So what is a root cause? A root cause is an underlying cause of problems or events that are taking place. In order to identify root causes in a problem, we must do what is called a root cause analysis. The purpose of a root cause analysis is to identify the root causes so they can be corrected or eliminated. Many times we think we know what the root causes are to our problems or issues, but they are actually a symptom of the true root causes. So let's get into how we will utilize a root cause analysis. Cause analysis is also referred to as the 5 whys. When going through a 5 whys exercise, you need to start with the numeric gap you identified in your problem statement. This will help you ground the brainstorming piece of the exercise. From there, you need to begin brainstorming why the gap is happening by asking why a couple of times in order to land on a root cause. A rule of thumb is to try asking why at least 5 times in order to land on the root cause. And you'll know when you landed on a root cause when you can say, I can do something about that. Remember, you need to answer each why with reasons that you have observed during your process walks. Finally, test the causal relationship of your root causes by utilizing therefore as you go up each why. Here's an example of how a team identified a root cause to their problem using the 5 whys exercise. So they started with the top of the gap, which is 8 excess PMR messages per physician. So why are there 8 excess PMR messages per day per physician? Because MDs get a lot of messages. Why? Because patients send multiple messages for the same reason within the same day. Why? Because patients are waiting for a reply. Why? Because physicians reply within 24 to 48 hours. So the team knew that they landed a root cause because they felt that they could do something about physicians' timely response. To ensure that the root cause analysis was done correctly, they plugged in therefore in their analysis to make sure that the causal relationship made sense. So physicians reply within 24 to 48 hours. Therefore, patients are waiting for a reply. Therefore, patients send multiple messages for the same reason within the same day. Therefore, physicians get a lot of messages. Therefore, there are 8 excess PMR messages per day per physician. A few tips when completing the 5 whys are: only include reasons from what you have observed. Avoid jumping to solutions. Remember that root causes are observable and quantifiable. Avoid including unrelated causes that don't relate to the effect. And lastly, you will know that you have landed on a root cause when you can actively solve for the issue. At this point, pause the video and take the needed time to work with your team to identify the root causes to your problem. Utilize the 5 Whys template found in your workbook to help the team land on those potential root causes. The last step of phase 2 is organizing the root causes. In this step, the team will prioritize the identified root causes by their impact to the gap. So let's go into details of what that entails. In the last step, you identified the root causes that are contributing to the problem. Now you need to prioritize them based on how much they contribute to the gap. In order to make that determination, you need to use data that you have collected and analyzed in your current state assessment to know how much each root cause contributes to the gap. So definitely leverage data from Tableau or tallies that you may have used. And if you don't have sufficient data to quantify the contribution of each root cause, go back and gather that data. A few tips on how to best organize root causes include: quantify the data using the same unit of measure. Grouping data into categories makes it more manageable. List all the key root causes, even if you don't think you can change them. Ensure that each root cause's quantifiable impact sums up to the total gap in the problem statement. And lastly, prioritize root causes in the Pareto from the largest to smallest contribution to the gap. At this point, pause the video and take the needed time to work with your team to organize the root causes based on how much they contribute to the gap. Utilize the electric Pareto template found in your workbook to help the team organize the identified root causes and input the numerical value of each root cause. That concludes the steps for phase 2. Before you wrap up this phase and move on to phase 3, it is important that you and your team have completed the deliverables for phase 2. Review each of the deliverables and ensure that you've completed them all in a timely manner. Here is a suggested timeline for completing phase 2 and its deliverables. The work for phase 2 should not take no more than 3 weeks to complete. During week 1, the team should watch the phase 2 video and start conducting the in-depth process walks, data collection, and then work on drafting the current state map. During week 2, the team should analyze data, finalize the current state map, and complete the problem statement. And then in week 3, the team should complete the 5 Whys exercise and organize the root causes based on their impact to the problem. If the team's timeline plan doesn't fall into the approximate 3 weeks, please come to OA office hours or discuss with your Tier 2 leaders. As part of your checkpoint review, answer the questions on the screen with your team before moving to the next phase. Feel free to pause the video to have this discussion now. Thank you for watching the Phase 2 video. If you have completed all the deliverables for Phase 2, please move on to the Phase 3 video. If you have any questions, please reach out to the Organizational Advancement team for additional support or sign up for office hours.